Hello, I'm Craig McLean. While we're on the current series of the Mini Twin Cam 16 valve improvements, while we've been taking the engine in and out and doing bits and bobs of improvements, it was actually my mate's idea, Anthony, to give you a bit of an insight into exactly how the head looks off the car and what modifications are involved with regards to fitting it. So Anthony's actually lent me his 8 valve head that you'll see in a minute, to show you a bit of detail, give you as much detail as I can from the build manual for anybody that's maybe interested in carrying out the conversion, because it really is worthwhile doing. So here we are. I'll show you a bit of a close-up of an 8 valve head, but obviously the 16 valve is very similar. So while we're on the subject of the K headed minis, I thought I would use this opportunity to show you a head off a vehicle. So this is my mate Anthony next door. This is his 8 valve head that he bought some time ago to do a conversion on one of his many projects. And I just thought I would show you, now that it's off, some of the modifications you need to do to make it fit the A series block. So the first one being, you'll notice that the side of the head here is nice and flat. It's got a machined flat surface down both sides. Well, you need to continue that flat surface from that point straight all the way along to that point. So what that entails in doing is welding a plate which follows the outline of the head, and basically it will then be skimmed so that the end of the head is perfectly flat. And what that's for is to fit your end plate, the specialist components end plate that the two cams fit through. I'll try and put a picture of that up for you now so you can see what I'm on about. So basically, as you can see, the cams are chain driven on the bikes. It's the same for the 16 and the 8 valve. But obviously we convert it to belt drive. So we also get in the kit, I mean, specialist components do the kit. I know there are other companies that do it as well. But you get a set of adapters that extend the cams through your side cover, and then obviously you get your vernier cam pulleys that fit onto them extenders with a long bolt that goes right through the centre. That's all part of the kit. So that's 2 of the mods. The cams get lengthened to come through your side plate, and you have a little plate to weld in the side. It all gets TIG welded in. I got mine done by Specialist Components, but obviously you can do it yourself if you're competent with a TIG welder and you know what you're doing. I've never done aluminium welding, so there was no chance I was going to risk wrecking a cylinder head. But Specialist Components done an absolute stunning job of mine. It was beautifully welded. Then this peg here also needs to come out, and I think you weld that hole up as well. It's just a simple weld that simple little hole up after you've took the peg out. That's another little mod. That's nothing as such. And here is what I was on about. These are the returns for your oil that go from your head back to your block. Now your block finishes somewhere here, so obviously these sections here on the bike would align with the block for the bike. But on the A series, these will just overhang the back of the block and piss oil down the back of the block. So we get around that by welding some plates into here again with threaded fittings in, so that you can put elbowed returns to drop some pipes, as you'll have seen on a previous video with me on, back to that little collector that mounts to the base of the block where the original fuel pump mounted. So that's a couple of the mods that you need to carry out to the head to make it fit. Now, it will fit onto a mini block, and when I said about the front 3 studs in a previous video, if you leave these 3 here, because that's the front of the head, if you leave these 3 here in the block of the A series, they will align the head exactly where it needs to be. You've then got to drill and tap your block to accept the other 7. So again, if you're competent, you can do that yourself. Specialist Components do a template for where to drill your block. That makes life a lot easier for you. So yeah, if you're happy to do a bit of drilling and tapping, you can obviously do that yourself. But like I've mentioned before, some of these holes do overlap the original hole. Can't remember which ones. So you do have to fill them in with studs first, flush them off, and then drill and tap. It's not that big of a job really, to be honest, that part of it. Probably the worst part is all the welding that needs done to your head, which for me, I would probably always leave that to a specialist. Another thing you can do, the water galleries, you can do the dry deck conversion. So on the head in the side, you've got a core plug. This one's been knocked out as it happens, and you can put a fitting in there and then you put a fitting in one of the core plugs on your block, and you basically put a hoop, and that runs the water from the side of your head into your block, and it comes from the thermostat point, which is right there on the front of the block. So it'll basically go through, along, out the other end, back to the block. I can't remember which way it flows in, but that's basically the route it takes. You don't have to do that. You can obviously have it flowing as it does now. That's another option. And the oil gallery again, I think the oil gallery needs, I can't remember what's to do with the oil gallery. I think it's to drill at an angle or something like that in the block so that it flows up to the head. I can't exactly remember. There's a small modification to do on the oil gallery, but the specialist components build manual will tell you all about that. I just thought I would give you a bit of a look at the head while it's out. So I'll flip the head over and I'll give you a bit of a better look at it. So just while the head is in this position, I thought I'd give you a bit of detail about it and compare that to the 16 valve alternative. So the 8 valve has 34mm inlet valves and 30mm exhaust, compared to the 16 valve that has 26.5mm inlet and 23mm exhaust. So you can see there is a bit of difference in the size of the valves. These are much bigger. Standard basic power figures for fitting one of these to a standard 1275 head is around about 110 brake horsepower for this 8 valve setup, or 130 brake horsepower for the 16. So there's like 20 brake horsepower difference in it. They also flow a bit differently. So for the 8 valve head, they flow in a region of 132 CFM inlet and 92 CFM for exhaust, compared to the 16 valve, which is 150 CFM inlet and 110 CFM exhaust. Again, I'm just getting these figures out the build manual. This is not something I obviously know off the top of my head. This is all written down in the specialist components build manual. So yeah, that's just a couple of differences in the power figures, or the expected power figures for the two heads. I'll flip it over, I'll let you have a look at the top and tell you a little bit more. They also reckon that the design of these heads, even by today's modern standards, is still really good. Things haven't really moved on that much. It's still a fantastic design. I mean, the fact that the injectors actually point perfectly at the back of the inlet valve, you know, they've thought about getting maximum performance out of the head. Yeah, it's probably miles ahead of the A-series heads, the old cast A-series heads. These are in another league. These have obviously come on a long way since then, but they are significantly newer. I think these were around from the 80s, whereas the Minis originated back in, I think it was the 40s or 50s. The A-series did anyways, rather. The Minis came out in 1959. So now we're at the exhaust side of the head, and there's no mods to do as such for this, although you will need a manifold that fits this head and ties up to your existing exhaust system or a mini exhaust system. I think the specialist components manifold are all designed to marry up to your standard size mini exhaust systems. And these basically just have copper sealing rings. Pipe slides in and the clamp pulls them tight against the rings, and that's what gives you your seal. So the back of the head, there's no real changes to make as such. It's pretty much as it is. Quick view from above, nothing much to see here and nothing to modify as such. You can make your own plate that fits in here, as I have, or you can just use the standard BMW one. There you can obviously see the spark plugs recessed down into the head, but these are beautifully clean. When they're cleaned up, you could blast that and polish it and it would look absolutely superb. To be honest, I actually think the 8 valve cover looks a little bit nicer than the 16. I've thought that for a while, to be honest. Another little mod you do have to do to this cover though, as I said before, there's the side of the head where your conversion plate goes on the side, and that conversion plate carries all the way up and follows the contour of the top of your cam cover. So you need to cut the edge of this cam cover perfectly straight all the way around so that it follows the contour of that plate that bolts onto this side. Again, that doesn't take a lot of doing. I did that myself in the garage one day and it wasn't overly difficult, if I'm honest. So yeah, that's the head looking down from above. Right, now we're at the inlet side of the head. And what I love about the 8 valve, which I prefer to the 16, is the fact that the injectors in the 8 valve fit into the head rather than into your manifold. They actually fit straight into your head, whereas on the 16 valve, them holes aren't there, and you've got to fit your injectors into your throttle bodies or whatever you're running. So apparently the BMW motorbike was one of the first ever fuel injected motorbikes. I've got a feeling it was either the first or I think it was either the first or one of the first. I can't remember which way around it is. But yeah, at the time it'll have been quite innovative, I suppose. It probably set the standard for others to follow. And here obviously is what I was talking about before. This is your outlet for your coolant. Now obviously there's no thermostat in this head. You do have to have a separate thermostat housing. Again, it's another part that's made by Specialist Components, but it's separate. It doesn't bolt onto the head. It kind of floats. You've got to make your pipe work up in between, as you'll probably see on mine in coming videos. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Obviously, if you want a little bit more power, you can always get the head polish imported. I had mine done by Turbo Phil. Turbo Phil's big into gas flow and cylinder heads. He's got his own floor bench, etc. And he gets some really, really good results. He's built a lot of engines for race cars and all sorts. I took mine to Phil many years ago and he actually gas flowed it for me. So yeah, that's pretty much that side of the head. And here is the Specialist Components build manual. It is a good few year old. I don't think they brought out another version. I think this is issue 6. I don't think they've actually brought a new one out since then, but nothing much has changed in all fairness. So yeah, that's the 8 valve head. There are only various differences between the 8 and the 6, as I've explained, but they are a fantastic conversion. Definitely something worth looking at. When I seen these engines on stands, on the Specialist Component stands at the likes of Mini in the Park, I just fell in love with the kit. And he had the 5-port turbo in at the time, and I thought, got to do it. I've just got to do it. That's amazing, because to do the alternative CAD 16 valve, you're looking at like £3,500 for a bare head, and then you've got everything else to go with it. Where I don't know what these sell for these days, but I picked my head up for around about £300, and I'm sure Auntie paid even less for this one. So you can pick these up relatively cheap. But obviously, like everything else, once people jump on the bandwagon and realise what people are doing, no doubt the prices go up. But this kit has been going for a few years. So yeah, that's basically the 8 valve head in a nutshell. There's probably things I've missed off, but a fantastic conversion. And if you want my advice, if you're thinking about doing it, just go for it. You won't regret it. They are an absolutely fantastic conversions. But obviously, not for the purists. So here's just a little look in the manual at some of the things you need for the conversion. So this is the side cover. I said to you before, you need to get the side of your head, the bottom of your head. That's the little plate that you get welded in the bottom to marry up to the bottom of that cover, and that bolts onto the side of the head with existing holes. Them 4 fixings in that plate, they're already drilled and tapped in the head, so that'll line up with the head as it should. It comes with your 2 cam pulleys. They have the followers that come through the side plate, through them seals into your cam pulleys. It has the existing cam belt pulley. That's for your what will be your jack shaft now, just to drive your oil pump. The cam belt, the pulley that goes on your crank behind your main bottom pulley. The bottom plate for your crank to come through and your original cam to come through with all the seals. That's the forward tensioner for the cam belt, which is designed to fit this system. They're just a set of ram pipes. And then you've got your drilling template. This is to drill your block to match up to your head. So that's the basic conversion kit. It's a fantastic bit of kit, it really is. That's just some of the parts you need to make this work. Right guys, before we go, I thought I would just show you this. This picture belongs to Specialist Components, but as you can see, this is the 16 valve head compared to the 8 valve I've just been showing you. And the head on the left shows all the waterways still in place, whereas the head on the right shows all the waterways that are being welded up, as I said you can possibly do. It also shows the little round fittings for the oil returns. So there you go, that's just a bit of a look of some of the mods. Well guys, I'm going to leave that there. As you can see, there's a few mods to do, but it is worthwhile doing. It's definitely worthwhile doing. It's a fantastic conversion. So yeah, like I say, I'll leave that there, guys. The next one will be probably the engine going back into the car, which is actually already in there now. We're ahead, obviously, of the YouTube. But yeah, you'll see that very, very shortly. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you very soon.